Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thank you for joining me on this episode where I am joined by author TJ Burdick, who recently wrote a book called The Rosary in Kidspeak. I'm very excited about this book. I have kids of my own. I actually just did a podcast recently on how to talk to your kids about God. It's a Catholic Mama, so anything with kids, and especially on how to get them engaged in kind of a lengthier prayer session is something that I find really, really interesting. So thank you so much, TJ, for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a very brief introduction that I gave. Can you expand on that a little bit? Who is TJ?
Well, I hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm a former missionary. I met my wife here in the United States. She's actually from Mexico, but long story short, I felt I was called to the priesthood. God gave me a different plan. I now have a beautiful wife, 4 children. I work in the public schools teaching Spanish for the most part. But as my passion is being an author, I've written a few books about the Catholic faith, including The Rosary and Kidspeak. And that hopefully we'll be able to talk about a lot today, but that's me in a nutshell.
Grand Rapids. So we are actually, we thought about moving to Michigan before we settled on Wisconsin. And I think it was more the Ann Arbor area, but I can't remember how close I'm not that familiar with Michigan.
Yeah, we're pretty close to Ann Arbor. We're about an hour and a half away. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's pretty close, considering that before we were, I lived outside of Philly and we kept going to visit my in-laws in Wisconsin. It was like 4 times a year, and it was a 30-hour road trip. So,
you got to go where family is. You got to go where family is. I mean, if you don't have family near you, it's hard to raise kids. It really is.
That's what we noticed, because we had great friends in our area in Pennsylvania. We had a couple family members, including my mother-in-law, but she's a full-time employee, and she lived an hour away. So we figured we'd go to a more densely family populated spot for us. So.
Yeah, that's the primary reason we stayed here in Grand Rapids. I have 4 other brothers and sisters, and my parents, they live all within about a half hour.
That's awesome.
So we're always together doing stuff, and all the kids are playing with their cousins. There's always something going on.
That's great. Yeah, that's the one thing we felt like we were lessening our children's childhood experience by not having a close family relation with their aunts and uncles and grandparents. Unfortunately, they don't have any cousin. They only have one cousin, and that is in DC. So we've taken that. I'm hoping other family members will start having kids.
Hopefully, they're listening to this podcast and hearing this, because that will happen a little bit sooner or later.
No pressure, but come on, pick up the. And actually, I think we're going to travel to Michigan and visit a couple friends in a few weeks.
Oh, fantastic! It's much better in the summer than it is in the winter. So.
Yes, yeah, we were there in October for a wedding. That was beautiful, but no, not the whole winter. Oh, that's not true. We went in November. My husband is an author as well, and he had to do the audio recording for his book, and so we were in New Holland.
Oh, okay.
Which would have been great if it wasn't snowing and just starting to be winter. I mean, we couldn't do anything.
Started to be winter there, and I know you're from Pennsylvania, so you know the issues that comes with a whole bunch of snow. But we get that lake effect, and it just hits us hard. And so we spent a lot of time in the hotel room. That's all, unfortunately. But now we'll go late spring, and it'll hopefully be better. But fantastic, yeah, that's a great time to come.
Yeah. So what with the Rosary and Kidspeak, and you said that you've written other Catholic books. Have you always been Catholic then?
Yeah, so I'm a cradle Catholic. I've been Catholic ever since day one. I grew up in a very, I wouldn't say Orthodox, but definitely a Catholic family with, working class. And they were the ones that taught me my faith. My parents, most especially, growing up when I was a teen, they went to weekly adoration. They were on the parish council. They did, youth group before I was born. They were always involved, and so they definitely put that instilled that in my heart at a very young age, which is actually why I felt kind of called to become a priest when I was in my teens, especially. And then after college a little bit. I should say, though, I did take about 10 years of just really discernment and deciding whether or not I was going to continue to be Catholic. There was a very dark time in my life during college, but came out of it pretty strong. Like I said, my parents prayed me out of it, and so did my siblings. They've been guardian angels for me in my life. And so when I started having my own children, I started thinking about ways that I could bring the faith to my own kids, and much in the same way that my parents did for me. And one of the things that came out of that was this particular book was the Rosary and Kidspeak. I felt a very strong conversion from the Rosary itself, which is kind of where that was like the seed that really kind of brought me out of the darkness that I was kind of leaving the faith. You could basically say that it was Mary's lasso that kind of brought me back. And so little by little, I just continued to pray the Rosary as a personal devotion, and I grew in my faith substantially to the point that I reconsidered the priesthood. Then, of course, met my wife as I was discerning, and I decided that was the pathway that I was going to go. And long story short, we had kids of our own, and so I've trying to figure out ways to make sure that my own kids are able to learn about the Catholic faith in a way that not only in ways that I learned, both as a son of my parents, but more importantly, ways that I could be able to do it uniquely for my own kids. Because me growing up, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was a different time, and there are a lot more. The struggles are a lot different. The difficulties and the obstacles that our children have to face nowadays are a lot harder, and it just made sense to be able to have Mary included in their formation as early as possible.
That's great. I do appreciate in the book that you, in the wording, it's not dumbed down, but it's very simple and accessible. And then also you used beautiful images for this. What made you decide to go with classical art?
Well, yeah. So the Rosary and Kidspeak was basically I had been writing the gospel for my children since writers write and authors write all the time, and so that's kind of an obsession that I've had ever since I was a teen. I've always enjoyed writing, and so I'd been writing the gospels for my children on a weekly basis, just so that they could understand the concepts. I should kind of backtrack. My wife is from Mexico, and we do speak Spanish at home, and we go to a Spanish-speaking missionary church in Grand Rapids. And so my kids, Spanish isn't their strongest language, English is, because of the school systems and because of, they work with me all the time too. And so I do speak a lot with them in English. But so we wanted to, since they went to this church where they go, basically Spanish is a foreign language for them. It's kind of like a half language, if you will. They understand lots of stuff, but when you think about the gospel itself, a lot of kids don't even understand the gospel in English, even though it's written in a pretty straightforward form. There's a lot of things that go unsaid. There's a lot of inferences that need to be made. And so I was writing the gospel for my children, and then I thought to myself, you know what? Every time I came across one of the mysteries of the Rosary as I was, writing the gospel for the kids, if it came up that Sunday, I started collecting them, and I thought, why don't we just make a book that is a collection of these, easy to understand gospel summaries for kids to understand it, and then just make a Rosary book out of it. And that was the main reason why the words are the way they are. They're simplified for a child to be able to understand the deep concepts that are occurring, and they kind of explain things in a way that kids can understand it and be able to take something away from it at a young age. So the words, that was the easy part. The hard part was trying to figure out how to match the words with images, because there's a lot of children. I know for my own children, when I first started writing this book, I only had one who was kind of an emerging reader. And so I wrote it as basic as I could so that she could read some of the words and kind of grow in her reading abilities. And then my other three children obviously couldn't read at all, and I didn't want them to have to miss out on, the beauty of what's going on in the Rosary. And the only thing that I could think of to help make them understand what these concepts were was to have images involved. And so I started looking up images of the different mysteries of the Rosary, and I found obviously a myriad of classical art and paintings and so many different beautiful images. And that was actually the hardest part of writing this book, was finding the right image, because there's so many different images and so many different interpretations of the scripture. And you're trying to figure out which one kind of is the best one, and one that will engage the children's eye and be able to say, oh yeah, I know what that mystery is based on what it looks like. And so from a very young age, I wanted my kids to be able to experience the Rosary, not only in its written format, but also in its visual format, which is why classical art seemed the best way to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beauty is such a huge part of the Catholic faith that it makes perfect sense to actually include beautiful paintings. And I do appreciate that, because I mean, it's great when you have, more simplistic, kid-focused illustrations or something for a book. But I do appreciate that it really feels like something important looking, because otherwise kids don't really get, especially at a young age, don't typically get exposed to classical art anywhere except for maybe in the Catholic Church. So that was very cool to see that you included that in the book.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, when you think the other option was to hire an illustrator or to be able to create my own drawings, and I thought about that, but like you said, there's a weight to having classical art. There's something that makes you feel important. It's the same thing that happens when you go into a beautiful church. Many people say they don't go to church because it's boring. And I say that's the best part about church, besides the Eucharist and besides, because there's so many things around the church that you can get lost in and really lose yourself in a stained glass window there, or just see a flicker of a candle over here, and just think about the many different ways that God presents himself to us in the imagery of a beautiful Catholic church. And I wanted to be able to put that type of feeling inside of a book, and classical images seem to be the right way to go.
Yeah. We just went to a Latin Mass. We actually had a difficult time in our new area because most of the churches are pretty modern looking. And we went down, we figured a Latin Mass church might be a little bit more classic looking, and we were right, and we walked in and it was absolutely beautiful. And it was great because even though it's in Latin, which is more challenging for small children to understand, and it's hard for them to, again, I have a 1, 3, and 5-year-old, to even understand the Mass in general is still a bit of a challenge anyway. But at least you feel like you're a part of something bigger as you're looking at all these beautiful stained glass windows. And, they were enjoying being able to count all the candles that they saw or the different statuettes. So it really drew them in and made them feel like they were participating, even if they didn't quite know how to participate yet.
It's a beautiful thing watching children respond to liturgy. It's so humbling. My own daughter, when my oldest daughter, when we first, obviously we always went to Mass, but when she started understanding what Mass was, she actually understood most through the stained glass windows when we told her who Saint Therese was, because that was always been her favorite saint. And we have a stained glass window of Saint Therese in our church. And since she kind of understood those concepts, we always decided to sit as close to that one, which just happens to be in the front row, to make sure that she is close to her favorite saint. And it's always been kind of like our little area. How people at church have their own little area. Well, people always know that that's kind of where our family sits, because my daughter is obsessed with Saint Therese, and she wants to sit next to her. And I always find that really remarkable, how incredibly deep that type of relationship and faith is with one particular saint, and how it makes her understand the liturgy in a very different way.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the front pew, so I'm curious. I find my kids behave better there. Do you find that or no?
100%, yes. Yeah. In fact, my priest will be the first one to tell most of the people at our church to go to the front row. I mean, the more you come, the more they understand, the more they see. And children are so tiny, and adults are so big, and we don't necessarily want to have to carry them all the time, especially when you have a 1, 3, and was it 1, 3, 4? Is that
1, 3, 5?
1, 3, 5. Yeah. I can imagine your arms probably get pretty tired holding them up over the heads of everyone else. Why not have them in the front row where they can be able to see, where they can be able to, kneel at the proper times and still be able to see, be able to stand and be able to see everything that's going on. I can't think of a better way for a family to teach and have their kids even more well behaved than to, quote unquote, have that little pressure put on them because they're in the front. And it helps. It helps.
Yeah, my husband, he was the one that liked to sit up front because his eyesight isn't very good. And at first I was very overwhelmed because I'm a convert and I hadn't been going to church. And so it seemed way too obvious for a family of 5 and with young children to sit up front. What if something happens? I don't know what to do. If I run out with the kids, whatever. All these things that I was paranoid about. But I realized that to have them actually be that close. I mean, if you let a kid sit as close to the TV as they want, they will sit very close. And the same thing. I mean, it feels like they're part of it rather than just looking at the backs of people's heads. It's interesting that you agree.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question. Now that you've been doing that for, I'm sure, quite some time, and I know that you just moved recently, now that you're going to all these new churches, I imagine that you get a lot of compliments from people who are saying, wow, your children behave so well in church. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's a natural thing for them to know that in church this is the expectation, and this is the beauty, and this is something that they can actually understand. They wouldn't be able to understand the concepts of the Catholic faith if they were not in that particular mindset. And if you're in the front, you actually kind of have a little bit more pressure to have that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, it just being that close, just that proximity, it makes it more tangible and real for them, which is really important. The only thing I will say is unless there are people sitting on either side of us, our 1.5-year-old will run away. And she was fast. I was running after her this Sunday. She's a difficult one. The other 2 love to listen and obey. It's great. She does not. So, I'm a little nervous as the years come on. I know. Oh boy. But I will say we started going to church when my almost 4 years. So my 3-year-old is going to be 4 in July, and we started going when she was 2.5. And now I'm expecting, my youngest, she's been going her whole life almost, and she's got some catching up to do, I guess. she's also not even 2. So, but yeah, that makes the run back from the front pew interesting. But it's still fun, and nobody seems to mind anyway. So, although when we went to this Latin Mass, it was very quiet and the church was beautiful, but it echoed like crazy. So so she was singing "Happy Birthday," and I had a massive coughing fit, because I'm getting over being sick. So people were nice enough not to stare or scowl at us. I really appreciate that. It was pretty obvious that we were there. Yeah, unfortunately. Now, for practical advice, how do you propose a parent uses the Rosary in Kidspeak?
Well, let me tell you how my family uses it. My children are currently, let's see here, 9, 6, 4, and 3.5. And so we've been praying. We only pray one decade every evening because we have an evening examination of conscience, more or less, in which we all gather together as a family, and we all say one thing that we're thankful for, one thing that we would like to pray for, and one thing that maybe we didn't do so well that day, something that we need to ask for forgiveness for. So each person goes around, and each child has an opportunity every day to choose who gets to go, and it's fun for them. And then at the very end, we have my oldest 2 children, who are my readers. They get to read the gospel, or they get to read the Rosary in Kidspeak for that night. And so what we do is we pray those during the weekdays, so that there's 5 mysteries. So Monday through Friday is always a Rosary day, in which we pray one decade of the Rosary. We reflect on the mystery, and then after that, we say our good nights. We give our kisses and our hugs, and we tuck them in. We go to bed. So that's the way that my family does it. Like I said, my daughter is 9. My oldest daughter is 9, and so when she gets a little bit older, we're thinking probably around 11 or 12, and the kids are a little bit more able to take on a longer Rosary time. We'll probably take on the full Rosary, and whether or not we'll use the Rosary in Kidspeak at that point, we don't know, because at that point they're going to be pretty well versed of what's going on in the mysteries, and we might actually move on to the biblical passages themselves. But we wouldn't be able to do that if we weren't using the Rosary in Kidspeak every night. My kids at this point could tell you, what the 3rd glorious mystery is, what the 4th luminous mystery. They have it ingrained in their mind based on the visuals. So they understand the stories from the words, but every time we ask them or we quiz them, like, all right, today's Thursday, and we're in the luminous mysteries. So what's the fourth luminous mystery? And before they open up the books, they already know what the image is. And so they're like, oh, Sarah, the fourth luminous mystery is, okay, so yesterday he was on the sermon talking on the mount. So that was the proclamation of the kingdom. So the fourth luminous mystery is it's the one where he's glowing white. That's what is that? Which one's that? It's the and then that'll come by and they'll like, it's a transfiguration. Oh yeah, okay. And then they open up their books and they start going. But because they're doing this mental exercise, they're connecting these classical images to what the mysteries are, which is exactly the whole point of the Rosary. And it's helping them visualize and put themselves in the places of, very Jesuitical, if you will, but putting yourselves in the gospel of that Rosary mystery. And it's really interesting to see how their minds work.
And that's really interesting. Just also so that people are, I love that you just want to do, there's only 10 Hail Marys in there. It doesn't take very long, but this whole process for your family, how long does that typically take each evening?
Oh, each evening? It probably takes about, let's see here. Depends if we do it in English or Spanish, to be honest. Spanish takes a little bit longer. We typically, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes.
That's nothing. That's not bad.
No, it's a good winding down session right before we go to bed. And
I was going to say, every time that we've, when my son can't sleep, or my daughter usually drifts off pretty fast, but if my son can't sleep and he likes to chit chat, I'm like, if you want to talk, let's pray a Hail Mary or let's pray an Our Father, and suddenly he's very sleepy. So
right,
it does. It's just very soothing. The whole thing is just very soothing. So of course, that's a good winding down transition.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way to end your day, because it's great, because we really appreciate the examination of conscience. It's a great way to start everything up. And kids, they call each other out for the things that they did bad. Maybe as a parent, you may have missed something. Well, you don't miss anything every night, because that's the kids are calling each other out. And you find some things that happen during the day that they're thankful for that you didn't even notice, that they on their own accord just understood, and we're like, oh wow, I didn't realize you saw that. And then their petitions are always quite unique too. It's very interesting to see the types of things that are going through their mind during that time.
This is nice. And you and your wife participate as well, right?
Correct. Yep. And we have to own up to our bad things. We have to ask for forgiveness when we, lose our temper, or if we're impatient, and the kids know it just as well as we do. And so
that's interesting.
My kids and, my wife and I, we're very quick to be able to say, I'm sorry. And the other one who you're asking forgiveness is very quick to say you're forgiven. Just because we want to make sure that they have that vocabulary, but more importantly, the interior motivation to be able to mean it when you say it. And so that's why as a family, you really can't teach those things anyway else than, really focusing on talking to one another. And that's a great way to end your day.
That is wonderful. So we, about a year ago, I guess maybe about a year ago, I don't think I've been doing the podcast for that long, but one of my first guests is a friend of mine, Jeannie Ewing, who's also a Catholic writer. And she had given me a formula for kids' prayers. And it's basically, what you're thankful for, what you're sorry for, and just help me Jesus too, or whatever. And it is really interesting to hear the kids, what they're thankful for. And over time, my kids do like to remind each other what they should be sorry for, which I think is pretty funny. And even again, the petitions are pretty interesting too. But my husband and I aren't included in this. It's just the kids that are doing that. But I really like that the parents. One of the things that I want to make sure my kids understand, and as a parent that I want to make sure I remember, is that we're all in this journey together. We're just maybe in different boats and in different places on it. But I'm not better because I'm bigger, and they're not less because they're smaller. But we all have things to work on, and we are all brothers and sisters in Christ, even if one of us is 30-some years older than the others.
Yeah, the idea of, first of all, Ginny Ewing is awesome. I love her to death. Her books are wonderful, and she's good people. So good job there. But I should say that the evolution of love is so interesting, isn't it? I mean, the fact that the way that you love, your 6-year-old is way different than how you're going to love that 6-year-old when he's 16, when he's 26, when he's 36. And even every day, that evolution of love changes, because the demands that 6-year-old puts on you one day could be different than the other day itself. And, the opposite is the vice versa is also true. The fact that, as a 6-year-old, that 6-year-old will love you in a different way than when you are, however old you are right now, as opposed to when you're, in your 50s, in your 70s, in your 80s, God willing that we make it that far. And it's interesting to see how that the love can change on a moment's notice, sure, but also on a daily, on a yearly, on a generationally. That's what we're doing here with books like the Rosary and Kidspeak, with our nightly prayer times and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're I see not classic but more retro illustrations of the whole family praying the Rosary together, or kneeling in front of the family shrine, and it's not something that you hear about or really see as a family prayer time together. And I think that is really wonderful, because it is the domestic church.
Yep, agreed. And I should also add too that there's another resource I've created. I know you mentioned earlier about being able to explain your kids the Mass and help them understand it a little bit more. There's another free resource that I've created. It's called Tiny Thomists, and we currently have 42 different issues of ways to be able to teach your kids the Catholic faith, basically created for very busy parents with children who live very busy lives, and literally 10, 15 minutes of instruction on a weekly basis. We have little study packets, not study packets, but they're little, how do I say, 8 to 10 packets of activities, or pages of activities, and situational writing, like saintly situations. If you find people who are doing certain things, kind of narrating what could happen in their future, and then asking kids to respond as to how they would respond. So that's one thing. We have the Summa Theologica in simplified Kidspeak. So
that's impressive.
It's called we call the simplified Summa. So we have a quote every week that the kids have to memorize, that goes along with a Bible verse. That's kind of Lectio Divina. And then we have a saint study that's involved in each one. And then we have at least 2 or 3 different family activities they can do each week based on a virtue that the students, or that the kids are trying to learn through the parents' instruction. And so it's basically like a Baltimore Catechism on steroids is what it is, basically.
Yeah, you have almost. You
can find it at tinythomas.com. It's actually free through my program called Signum Dei. It's SIGNUMDEI.com. There's a whole bunch of free resources that I've created for people like you and me who are just super duper busy, and we have kids who are running too fast for us to catch them, and we want to be able to teach them the Catholic faith. And so we have to figure out how to do that. So Tiny Thomas was my way of kind of making that happen.
That's awesome. And what a great my son was asking or saying something. What was it today? He was asking, why not everybody? Why not everyone? Why aren't they all Catholic? And I was like, well, so we wound up getting into a confused knowledge of God, and then we got into the Reformation. This was all in like a 30-minute drive to and from the park. So it got deep real fast. I was like, man, he's stretching. But he's like, I hope I always know to be Catholic. And I said, I hope that too. Just keep asking the questions that you're asking, because otherwise you have to know your faith in order to be able to defend it to yourself, especially, and maybe to others if it comes down to it.
I was just having a discussion with my wife about that on a walk we had the other day, and how incredibly difficult it's going to be for the next generation to remain Catholic. It's going to be so incredibly difficult. And I always wonder, how the types of obstacles that our children are going to overcome is going to be remarkable. I mean, they're going to be saints automatically if they're able to do it. And so it's up for us to kind of teach them the basics to be able to do that, but more importantly, to guide them in our lifestyle and through our love. And man, it's going to be tough for them. But at the same time, I'm so hopeful for the great saints they're going to become. And anything that I can do to help make that happen, I'm going to do it. So
that's a wonderful perspective. And especially, since we live in an age where just worships scientism, it's not even science, just scientism, to know that, through Thomas Aquinas and a lot of the other church fathers, that there is actually really good logical evidence for all of this. It's not just some, loopy feeling that you might get, that I think is, just keep asking those questions and keep digging into the logic and the reason behind all of it. I think will probably help this next generation. I mean, that certainly is what helped me, because I used to think that to be faithful, that must be nice for those those sweet and naive people. They just don't know, reality or whatever. And it was when I found out that there's a good logical reason to believe in God, and then the Catholic Church is the most logical of all. That's what brought me back. And I just assumed, because I'm a product, I'm almost a Gen Xer, but an older millennial, so that, I was steeped in all of this atheistic scientism thought growing up. So
beyond scientism, I think Pope Pius XII, I could be wrong about which Pius I'm thinking of, but I think he said modernism is the what did he say? It's the compilation of it's the compilation of all heresies into one thing. And then, we think about nominalism, you think about Arianism, you think of Manichaeism, you think about consumerism, communism. All this stuff is occurring in at this one moment in time. And it's all just a huge barrage of, it's going to hit our kids harder than ever, because in the future, who knows, what the political state's going to be. But at the current moment, we still have our religious freedom, which is good. But who knows what's going to happen in the future with modernism, which tends to be a compilation of all this negative energy and all this negative philosophies that do not equate to what you just stated, the logical beauty of the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
We got to be able to express that to folks. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it seems like studies are showing that the younger generations are more traditional and even more faithful. So hopefully there's hope. Or we keep praying the Rosary with the intention of God changing the hearts and minds of the modernist mindset.
There's a lot of merit to that, There's a ton of merit to that in our sacrifices. So, we're the ones that need to lay that framework, and, we're going to do it.
So parents need to do that with their children. Pray the Rosary. I love it. Well, I think, so you said Tiny Thomas.
Yep, tinythomas.com.
Okay.
That will actually bring you to my site, which is signumdei.com. But yeah.
And then tjburdick.com. I'm going to put all this in the show notes too, so people can just click on it.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Yeah, my site, TJ Burdick. You'll have everything that I offer on there too. It's pretty quick links, and I give away a lot of stuff. So if you like free stuff, feel free to visit my sites.
That's great. And then for the Rosary and Kidspeak, I'll also put a link on that, but that is available on tjburdick.com, or will be. And then also it's on En Route, which is a publishing company, and I'll put that link as well. So is there any last thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
No, not at all. I think this was great talking with you. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you write another kids book or have anything else you want to say about parenting and Catholicism, I'm happy to have you back on.
Gosh, you can have me on every week. I could do this all day.
You should start your own podcast. It's fun. Just what's another thing to add to the list.
Right.
All right, for anybody listening, I will put all the links to TJ's work in the show notes, so you can click there. And other than that, thank you so much for joining me, and until next time. Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.